Good day everyone, I am Jeline A. Umanya, a Blast 3 student of NUNESCOS. Today, let me discuss to you the developing the research study. Before we conduct our research study, it is important to ask ourselves, where do I begin? Or where does the planning begin? By asking questions, we strike the first spark, igniting a chain reaction that leads to the research process. As we learned earlier, the major purpose of basic research is to discover new knowledge. Aristotle is characterized by use of the syllogism. A syllogism is a type of logical argument that is usually brief in form. It is a type of deductive reasoning that establishes a conclusion based on premises. For example, all men are mortal. Justin is a man. Therefore, Justin is mortal. The truth of the conclusion obviously depends upon the truth of basic premise, which in this example was all men are mortal. The main difference between inductive and deductive reasoning is the inductive reasoning aims to developing a theory, while deductive reasoning aims at testing theory. Inductive reasoning moves from specific observation to broad generalization, and deductive reasoning the other way around. When there is little to no existing literature on a topic, it is common to perform inductive research because there is no theory to test. The inductive approach consists of 3 stages, which are observation, observe a pattern, and develop a theory. Example of observation: a low-cost airline flight is delayed. Dogs A and B have fleas. Elephants depend on water to exist. And observe the pattern. Another 20 flights from low-cost airlines are delayed. All observed dogs have fleas. All observed animals depends on water to exist. So as we go to develop a theory, it becomes low-cost airline always as we go to develop a theory. So as we go to develop a theory, it becomes low-cost airlines always have delays. All dogs have fleas. And all biological life depends on water to exist. When conducting deductive research, we always start with a theory. It is the result of our inductive research. Reasoning deductively means testing these theories. If there is no theory yet, we cannot conduct a deductive research. The deductive research approach consists of 4 stages known as: start with an existing theory, formulate a hypothesis based on existing theory, collect data to test the hypothesis, and analyze the results. In this result, it asking ourselves, does the data or support the hypothesis? As Mabi has pointed out, with the deductive method, we will have reason toward observations. With inductive method, we will have reason from observations. Inductive reasoning contributed to the development of what is known as the scientific method or the scientific method of inquiry or SMI. Many scholars still consider the scientific methods of inquiry to be the most valid methods for solving unanswered questions and solving problems. There is a general consensus among researchers regarding the basic pattern of the scientific method of inquiry, but specific elements do sometimes vary. Later described the scientific method of inquiry as means by which insight into undiscovered truth is sought by identifying the problem that will provide the goal of the research, gathering the data needed to resolve the problem, developing a tentative hypothesis, and empirically testing the hypothesis by analyzing the data. According to Babley, who says the scientific method of inquiry is a combination of the inductive and deductive methods, but depending upon our research piece. He summarizes the basic steps of the scientific methods as identification of an idea or interest, theory construction, derivation of theoretical hypothesis or expectation, operationalization of concept, and testing of hypothesis. According to Frankfurt Magnus, state that research process consists of 7 principal stages, which are problem, hypothesis, research design, measurement, data collection, data analysis, and generalization. They point out that each stage influences the development of theory and is influenced by it in turn, but remind us that general progress only occurs when there has been deep critical investigation into the working of our field. This means that we must study the intellectual foundation of the last field. This type of reflection will influence not only our research but also the development of systems and services for the practice of LIS. Liddy and Armand developed a diagram which helped to illustrate the circular nature of research. As they state, every researcher soon learns that genuine research yields many problems as it results. Such is the nature of the discovery of knowledge. First, research begins with a problem, an unanswered question in the mind of the researcher. Second, research defines the goal in terms of a clear statement of the problem. Third, research subdivides the problem into appropriate sub-problems. Fourth, research posits tentative solution to the problems through reasonable hypotheses. These hypotheses direct the researcher to appropriate data. Fifth, research looks for data directed by the hypothesis and guided by the problem. The data are collected and organized. Lastly, research interprets the meaning of data, which leads to a resolution of the problem, thus confirming or rejecting the hypothesis and or providing an answer to the question that began the research cycle. At this point, one or more new problems may emerge. The research problem is essentially the topic to be investigated or what known. Given the primary importance of identifying a problem before conducting research, we know where and how are problems found. The answer to the first part of our question is that problems are all around us. For example, one important, if not essential, approach toward identifying problems for research in a given field is to develop a true knowledge and understanding of the field. More specifically, the will-be researcher should be fully familiar with the known facts and accepted ideas in the field, be knowledgeable of previous related research in the area, and be aware of gaps in knowledge in the field or unresearched areas. In identifying the problems, it deals with people, things, record thoughts and ideas, dynamic and energy. In order to be suitable for basic research, a problem should exhibit several characteristics. First, the problem should represent conceptual thinking, inquiry, and insight, not merely activity. For example, simple collecting data and making comparisons are not activities representative or true research problems. Activities such as studying a subject field and reading earlier research are more likely to be indicative of a conceptually developed research problem. Second, the variables related to the problem should represent some sort of meaningful relationship. Inherent in a problem representing some kind of relationship between two or more variables is consideration of the cost of the relationship. For example, a relationship between the level of college library use and the class of level of student users. Why does such a relationship exist? Why does a higher class level seems to cost greater use of the library? Again, what is the nature of the relationship, and does the research problem incorporate this concern? Or, if there is not a causal relationship between the variables, how are they related, if at all? The problem must reflect some interpretation of relationship. For example, perhaps the variables are not related directly, but indirectly through the influence of yet another variables or variables. Only a problem represented by a conceptual, insightful development and statement will be able to lead to this kind of understanding. Last but not least, the problem should point to research that is manageable. In short, is the problem researchable? Due to real constraints such as time and money, perfectly designed research is not always possible. The researcher typically is in the position of having to compromise what is still and what is practicable. This is particularly true of research which relatively applied in nature. As Martin and Lancaster stated, in any investigation within a library or information center, some compromises may be necessary between what is most desirable from the investigator's viewpoint and what appears feasible to the manager of the service. Statement of the problem is an intellectual stimulus that calls for an organized response in the form of scientific inquiry and should express a relationship between two or more variables. When we say variables, it is any property or characteristic of some event, objects, or perhaps person that may have different values at different times depending on their condition. Example of variables may be age, height of a certain person or a certain buildings, the academic performance, and reaction time. If we speak about the statement of the problem, we have to bear in mind that this is divided into two parts: general objectives and specific. Based on lectures by David Clark, they suggest writing 3 short sentences. First, the lead-in. Second, a statement about originality. Third, a justification. The problem is what the research is about, and the purpose is why the research is conducted. The problem is an effect the first proposition. For example, one might conduct research in the relationship between certain teaching methods and the effectiveness of the bibliographic instruction known as the problem. In order to increase the sources of future bibliographic instruction program, this is what we call the purpose. All problems contains components or sub-problems which will be appropriate for study, if not solution. Sub-problems can facilitate resolving a large problem piecemeal, as they are often more manageable or researchable than the general problem and can be investigated separately. The sub-problem should, when combined, equal the whole of the main problem. Actually, identifying sub-problem is generally a relatively straightforward process involving 2 basic related steps. First, the researcher should break the main problem down into its components, and second, he or she should identify the words that indicate a need for the collection and interpretation of data. There are 3 reasons why theory is important in research. Firstly, provide framework for analysis. Secondly, provide efficient method for field development. And finally, provide a clear explanation for pragmatic work. We shall use assisting in our research. However, it can be challenging to find and select relevant theories that may be useful in our research. We also need to appreciate the sample, including a number of theories in our thesis is not the same as providing a strong theoretical foundation to our research. The first definition is a statement of concept and their interrelationship that shows how and why a phenomenon occurs. A theory is used to explain of a phenomenon arrived at through examination and contemplation of the relevant facts. Yet, another author described a theory as seeking to describe, explain, and predict reality in a sequential order. So, theory in the simplest term may be regarded as a set of interrelated concepts or ideas that explain some aspect of the real world. As you can hear the different definition here, the concept of theory were defending on a contexting focus. The hypothesis represent the researcher expectation about the relationship between the variables of the problem. A research investigation begins the question, but questions cannot be tested directly. It is the proposed relationship between the variables that is tested. The hypothesis represents an educated guess about what will happen in an experiment. A research hypothesis is a testable statement derived from research question. Testing the hypothesis, we will consider how we will collect the data and the variables that we have defined in our research question and our hypothesis hypothesis about the relationship. Essentially, for this stage, we will completing this sentence a way that I can test this hypothesis as after collecting our data, we will analyze it to determine whether or not evidence support our hypothesis in these steps. We will complete the sentence, I'll know my hypothesis is supported if, in this way, each of the subsequent develops logically on a clear and testable hypothesis. Reliability and validity of our research. When we are writing our research, we need to be aware of two terms. Our research needs to be reliable and valid. Why do you think that our research is reliable? And why do you think that our research is valid? What is reliability? Reliability refers to whether your data collection techniques and analytic procedure will produce consistent findings if they were repeated on another occasion or if they were replicated by another researcher. This means to have a reliable research. Why do you think that our research is reliable? We shall address these 4 points, the 2 errors and 2 biases, and justify why did they not occur in our research so that our research is reliable. So let us move on to validity of our research, and we have 3 different kinds of validity. We have the construct validity, internal validity, and external validity. So let's start the construct validity. Construct validity is concerned with the extent to which your research measures what it claims to measure. Why do you believe that our research is achieving construct validity? So our answer should have from a top or most general things we justify to the most concrete one, and that way we will improve that our research is achieving the construct validity. The second is the internal validity. Internal validity is established when your research demonstrates a causal relationship between 2 variables. Why are you making this assumption from the early beginning that this relationship is existed? So our assumption, the more educating the support influence will be, then the more happier the customer will be, more satisfied that will be. Why we are making this assumption? Why do we believe that this relationship between these 2 variables exists? If you are asked about internal validity, this is the point that we shall justify. Finally, we have the external validity. External validity is concerned with whether a study's research findings can be generalized to other relevant settings or groups. So you when asked external validity, you should justify the choice of your sample. So in this chapter, which is developing the research study, has considered 4 of these stages known as identification or the development of the theory, identification of the problem, formulation of the hypothesis, and measurement as related to validity, reliability, and level. A research project is not likely to succeed unless carefully attention has been paid to the steps. Yet, it is tempting for the researcher to slide, if not ignore, these steps in order to get involved in the design of the study and the collection and analysis of data. Researchers should realize that the time that goes into the conceptual development and planning of a research is time well spent, and it will result in fewer problems in the later stages of the research. That will be all. Thank you.